most ruthless merchant in the world. Cornelius Vanderbilt, a man without education, ill-tempered, neurotic, and ruthless. Most people who met him either hated him or feared him. In addition to all this, he was also one of the wealthiest men in history, an incredibly shrewd and cunning businessman who was once the richest man in the world. In fact, according to reports, when Vanderbilt died, the wealth he left behind was greater than what was held in the entire United States Treasury at the time. Before the rise of wealthy individuals like Rockefeller or Henry Ford, Cornelius Vanderbilt was the tycoon who earned the title of the original robber baron. This was a term used for successful entrepreneurs who amassed enormous wealth through brutally ruthless business practices. And undoubtedly, his life story is one of the most famous tales of rising from absolute poverty to extreme wealth, a true rags-to-riches story. Cornelius's ancestors had initially immigrated to America as servants. Therefore, Cornelius's journey from nothing to unimaginable wealth and power is truly astounding. Now, let's travel back to the early 1800s and see where it all began. Cornelius dropped out of school at the age of 11 and went to work on his father's boat, which transported goods across the river in New York Harbor. After learning the trade, Cornelius now wanted to start his own business in the same industry. This meant he needed a small boat. Cornelius's mother was a farmer and didn't have much money, but she had a small savings of about $100, which she decided to lend to her son. This amount was enough to buy a small boat. However, there was one condition for receiving this loan. He had to clear a field full of stones so his mother could farm there. Cornelius always had a very strong work ethic, so he immediately agreed. But he soon realized that clearing that many stones from the land would take a very long time. So he went to the other local kids and convinced them to help him with the work, promising them free rides on his new boat in return. Together, they cleared the land. His mother gave him the $100 loan, and Cornelius bought his first boat at the age of 16. He then began transporting cargo and passengers between Staten Island and Manhattan. Of course, there was fierce competition among other boat owners engaged in the same business, but Vanderbilt's strategy was to undercut everyone else with the cheapest fares in the market. Due to the reliable and affordable services he provided in this field, he quickly gained a reputation. The key point here is that after repaying the loan his mother had given him, he reinvested all the profits he earned back into the business. This meant he soon could buy another boat, and then another, and then another. Doing this is a kind of capitalist success plan, and it's not much different from how Jeff Bezos built Amazon. Initially, you must live frugally and reinvest all business profits directly for further growth, and you must continue this until you can build your empire. Since Cornelius was very hardworking, it didn't take long for him to acquire many boats that transported both people and goods on various routes. People even gave him the nickname Commodore. After this, Cornelius achieved another major success. During the War of 1812 between the United States and Britain, the U.S. government signed a lucrative contract with him to help transport soldiers on his boats. Despite working long hours, at the age of 19, he found the opportunity to marry his cousin, and they later had 13 children. Although he didn't have much time to be a good father or husband, there are many reports of Cornelius neglecting them and having a very unpleasant family life. He even once institutionalized his wife in a mental asylum for a short period. A few years later, he also institutionalized one of his sons simply because he suffered from epileptic seizures, as Cornelius viewed these seizures as a sign of weakness and mental disorder. But on the business side, his trade was booming. In the late 1820s, Cornelius figured out how to expand and upgrade his business through steamships. He knew that the new steamship technology was much more efficient than the boats he was using. As a result, he began investing heavily in purchasing these steamships and again used the same tactics he had employed with his previous boats. First, he eliminated each competitor with prices lower than the market, and then he stole all their customers. At one point, he even started offering some trips for free. For Cornelius, it didn't matter if he lost money on each trip because he had a simple logic. As long as he had more money than his competitors, he could quickly bankrupt them by taking all their customers. Then, once they were eliminated from the market, he would raise his prices to more sustainable levels. These ruthless tactics bankrupted several other business owners in the industry. But in many cases, when boat owners realized they couldn't compete with Cornelius's pricing, he simply bought their businesses at a lower price. There were even larger steamship companies that paid Cornelius a lump sum to leave their area and not compete in their trade routes. For example, when Cornelius began operations on the Hudson River, a company called the Steamship Association, which operated there, paid him $100,000 to stop his ships from operating in their territory. For them, paying Cornelius was more cost-effective than trying to compete with his low prices. Of course, every time Cornelius received such a large profit or bought a competitor at a discounted rate, his fleet grew larger, and consequently, his power and wealth increased. For Cornelius, making money was a game, and he was determined to win it. However, even as his wealth grew, the wealthy and upper-class circles did not accept him. His lack of education and struggles with proper writing made things difficult for him, and his manner of speaking and appearance certainly didn't resemble that of most upper-class individuals. Cornelius used his working-class background to his advantage from the start, advertising his boats as the People's Line and affordable boats for ordinary people. But he was never satisfied with what he had, and in 1849, he identified his next major source of income, the California Gold Rush. You may have heard that many people became wealthy during the gold rush, though often it was those selling picks and shovels, not the gold seekers themselves. But if you want to know who became the wealthiest during this gold rush, it was those who transported people to the gold-rich areas. After gold was discovered in California, hundreds of thousands of people traveled there hoping to get rich. This was the largest mass migration in American history. But at that time, California was not yet connected to the rest of the country by railroad, and Cornelius wanted to make money from this. So he immediately began offering ship travel services to California. Of course, several others were doing the same. But Cornelius differed from them in one key aspect. He had found a new route through Nicaragua to California, which was about 965 kilometers shorter than the route through Panama. He secured an exclusive agreement with the government of Nicaragua, making travel on Cornelius's ships faster and cheaper than his competitors, thus attracting many more customers. As more people flocked to California due to the gold rush, Cornelius amassed more and more wealth. In 1853, Cornelius did something he had never done before. He went on vacation. He was approaching 60 years old and had worked almost non-stop since childhood, so he decided to finally take a break. He bought a massive luxury yacht to take his family on a tour of Europe. But immediately after this, everything went very wrong. He had entrusted the management of his new business in Nicaragua to two men named Morgan and Garrison, who were business partners. But they ultimately betrayed him and made a secret deal with the new president of Nicaragua, a man named William Walker, who had seized power by force. According to this deal, Cornelius's exclusive rights to operate his ships throughout the country would be given to Morgan and Garrison. When Cornelius found out, he sent them one of the shortest and most threatening letters. It read, "Gentlemen, you have attempted to cheat me. I won't sue you because the law takes too long. I will ruin you. Yours truly, Cornelius Vanderbilt." And he did exactly what he said he would. Cornelius immediately launched another transportation company nearby, and used his old trick of offering very low prices to steal customers. He prevented passengers from being transported to or from Nicaragua to create a blockade and boycott. He also convinced neighboring countries not to recognize Walker's new government and ultimately helped start a war to completely overthrow the new government in Nicaragua. As Cornelius had promised in his letter, he completely destroyed those who had deceived him.
At this point, Cornelius was nearly 60 years old. While most people look forward to retirement and a quieter life at 60, for Cornelius, this was not the case. He was now on the verge of monopolizing an entirely different industry. But before we delve into that, let's take a detour into his personal life. In 1868, Cornelius's wife passed away, the same wife he had briefly sent to a mental asylum. And just 1 year after the death of his first wife, Cornelius married another woman named Frank Armstrong Crawford. And yes, I was surprised by her name too, because Frank is a male name. But no, her name was indeed Frank. Apparently, her parents named her Frank because they wanted their child's name to be similar to that of their close friend. And they initially thought the baby was a boy, but when the child was born and they realized it was a girl, they still named her Frank. Cornelius married Frank, who was more than 40 years younger than him. This wasn't the only strange aspect of the story. Frank was not only 40 years younger than Cornelius, but also his cousin, just like his first marriage to his cousin Sophia. After his first wife's death, he married Frank, who was again his cousin, a year later. We know that marrying cousins was more common back then, but still, consider that he was a well-traveled man, yet both times he married his cousins. So, as you can see, Cornelius had a strange personal life as well. But commercially, this was really the beginning of the story. He was a visionary, and just as he had previously recognized that the steamship industry could be profitable, this time he turned to the railroad industry. He realized that more cargo could be transported by train, and if he wanted to dominate transportation, he had to focus on this industry. So he began selling his ships to invest in the railroad industry instead. When Cornelius entered this field, there were already various independent railroad services operating, but he started connecting railroads between different regions and creating an integrated network. He wanted to merge all these different railroads and build a giant empire. By doing this, he began establishing a monopoly in rail transport. Of course, as always, Cornelius reinvested most of his profits to buy more railroads and expand faster, and he soon built the largest railroad network in the world. In his later years, Cornelius began transferring part of his vast wealth toward charity. For example, he founded Vanderbilt University with a donation of $1 million, which was the largest charitable donation in American history at the time. But it was around this time that he became very ill and bedridden. Despite his poor condition, he remained aggressive. For instance, when media personnel gathered outside his house to report on his illness, he wanted to go out and attack them. However, after several months of battling illness, he passed away in 1877 at the age of 82. The New York Times reported the cause of death as debility due to a long-standing chronic disease. At the time of his death, Cornelius's wealth was around $100 million. Adjusted for inflation, that would be approximately $200 billion today. Of course, Cornelius was a divisive figure. Many people hated him, and often respect for him was mixed with bitterness. Even his enemies had to admit that he significantly improved and expanded the transportation industry, first through his boats, then steamships, and finally railroads. In the process of this expansion, he helped connect different parts of the country and made it easier to transport people and goods at affordable prices. In many ways, Cornelius stabilized and shaped the American economy more than any other entrepreneur. And ultimately, he managed to turn the initial $100 loan from his mother into immense wealth that few others in history could match. Truly amazing.
Thank you very much for watching this video until the end. If you like this video, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you have any topics in mind, please write them in the comments so we can make videos about them.